everybody. Here was the original Rumble. Let me say something before starting. Oh, sorry, my vocals. The second day, third day of the festival. You know, luckily, this is why I do instrumental music. You don't have to bother all that. Anyway, the title of this seminar, this meeting, is called Wray and the Pre-Surf Era. So we're here to talk about the pre-surf music era, what was there before surf and where surf is coming from. You know? Some characters and musicians brought to the creation of surf music, and two in particular are generally considered the fathers. One is Duane Eddy and the other one is Wray. This brought the guitar in front and put this instrument under different light. And we got other musicians like Harold Key, who says that Los Angeles was jazz town in the 50s. And that's true, actually, and this reflects on all the early surf music videos. Think about Slippery When Wet from Bruce Brown, 1958. That is all jazz music. So the mix of all these factors generated surf music. Some consider surf music one early form of punk. I'm not sure if it's correct, but definitely we cannot consider it fully rock and roll. It's a mix of things, and I said it also another time, I definitely consider surf music born from the mix of Duane Eddy, Wray sound and jazz, putting together these strange things, and with the spirits of the Californian kids, the freedom that there was in California, the lack of problems, financial problems and everything at the time for the kids was very easy to form a tribes and live with their own language, their own lifestyle. But today we talk about Wray, you know, and I would start first of all saying something about who this guy was. We're gonna go deeper a bit with that. I'm just reading something that you can easily find on the net, but maybe not all of you went on Wikipedia looking who Wray was. So Wray was born in 1929 in Dunn, North Carolina. They were Shawnee nothing Americans, and in fact some of these songs reflect their names after American Indian tribes, like Shawnee, Apache, or Comanche. Apache actually from, who did Apache the first time? Shadows made it famous first, and then other people, including Wray, you know. He served the army, the US Army in the Korean War, and contracted tuberculosis, which laid him up in the hospital for over a year. And they finish up removing a lung, and the doctors say you will never be able to sing anymore. So he had to go instrumental, you know. And in 1958, his first hit, Rumble, was banned in New York and Boston for fear it would incite teenage gang violence. So it's crazy. So after a while, tiring of the corporate music machine, he began recording albums using a 3-truck studio he converted from a outbuilding on his brother's property, where his father was used to raise chickens. So he actually went on since the beginning with this concept. He created the lo-fi, basically. That's the idea, you know. From the early 70s, he started new musical ventures in California while living in San Francisco, forming new bands and creating new following over there. And like I said, a lot of details can be found on the internet. And Wray died of a heart failure in his home in Copenhagen. He moved to Denmark. He had lots of kids, for what I remember, and with many of those lost completely contact since he moved in Denmark. He died at the age of 76 on November 5th, 2005. So, a few things that has to be said and discussed. This thing is interesting because at the live gig in Fredericksburg, in Virginia, attempting to work up a backend for the Diamonds, the Straw, Wray and his Rayman came up with instrumental Rumble, which they originally called Oddball. It was an instant hit with the live audience, which demanded 4 repeats that night. I'm reading what I find online, you know. Eventually, the instrumental came to the attention of the record producer Archie Blair of Cadence Records, produced the record, who hated immediately the song. He didn't like it, but the stepdaughter of this guy, of Blair's, actually loved the song. So he decided to release it anyway. And Rumble has a very rough sound, and it sounded very like a street fight. That was the whole concept of the song, a street fight. This is why, say again, it was banned in several US radio markets, because the term rumble was a slang term for a gang fight, and it was fair that that piece of harsh sound glorified juvenile delinquency. So actually, this is the beginning. This is the beginning. So I think that this stuff mixed with what was in Los Angeles, with this freedom idea, the spirits, the surfers, strongly created surf music. Many other, I mentioned before, Duane Eddy. Mentioned again Paul Johnson. What he told me is that everybody, all these kids, they were just starting playing guitar, wanted to sound like Link Wray, Duane Eddy. They were all trying, of course, say, oh, we can play this and that, and this is how surf music was born, actually. So, we have a few people here that know the music of Link Wray very well, that they've been inspired in their career by Link Wray. And I will start with the Italian guy. Dome la Muerte is our rocking guy from closest Pisa, playing rock music in ages. And then we got Eric, our second guest. Please, Eric, get the chair. And of course, Rudy Protrudy. Where is Rudy? There, I don't see him. Oh, there he is. There's also another guy that is very welcome here, which is Aldo Pedron, because he said, when I told him about the Link Wray talking, he said, oh, I have something to say about Link Wray. So he's very welcome here. So we have three persons here who know very well the music of Link, and let's start with Rudy here. Tell us something about you, Rudy, and about your career.
I just wrote a book, and you can buy it at the merch store.
There's an easy answer.
Anything you want to know about me is in my book. 2 parts of the book. They're only 30 euros each. Buy 2, buy 4. Buy 1 for your mom. Buy 1 for your boyfriend. Buy 1 for your girlfriend and 1 for your wife, please.
I'm a dog.
I like that T-shirt. That's very cool. Buy 1 for your dog. Buy 1 for the baby you don't have yet, because she's going to really appreciate it when she grows up. I promise. About me, well, I started playing guitar when I was 12 years old. My main influence was not Link Wray, because I had never heard of Link Wray. It was Chuck Berry, the great Chuck Berry, the best rock and roll guitar player ever, in my opinion.
Agreed.
The best.
Agreed.
But you guys probably all know I'm into Five Stones and all that kind of stuff. But the way I grew up in Pennsylvania. It was a very backwards place to live. And how it relates to Link Wray is a friend of mine lived in Washington, D.C. At the time that Link Wray was alive, living in and playing in Washington, D.C., and he turned me on to Link Wray at a very young age. I think I was 16, 17. Because he could get all of Link Wray's 45s with the black label on Swan. He could get them really cheap in Washington, and you couldn't get them anywhere else. But they were local, so you could buy them for $1. So he would give me all these great 45s by Link Wray. And then I would tape them and put them on an 8-track tape player, and we'd drive around in Pennsylvania at night with Link Wray on the 8-track, inspiring me to commit acts of juvenile delinquency, which I committed a lot of, thanks to Link and his music. So you know what they said, it's really true. It sounds ridiculous now that music could make you get into a fight or steal hubcap or lawn jockeys off of people's lawns, but yes, it can. It can also make you have sex. I mean, all the things that they told you rock and roll does, it does. And that's why we love it. because we all love sex and violence and drugs and booze. Tell me one person here who doesn't like that. Is there someone in the room who doesn't like that? You're lying. So does that answer your question?
Yes, yes, absolutely. Thank you. That answers very well. Eric, what about you? Tell us something about you and how you got closer to the music of Wray.
Well, in short, I started playing with Rudy in 1994. We did a tour of Europe with playing Link Wray's music. And then, not a year later, I got a phone call from the agency of Link Wray himself, and he said, well, Link is looking for those two guys from Holland who can play Link Wray music. And are you the guys who played with Rudy? I said, yeah. Well, Link Wray wants you to play with him. And at the time I was still smoking, and I lighted 2 cigarettes simultaneously, because I couldn't believe what happened. And I actually started playing with Link Wray for a couple of albums, a couple of years, a couple of tours, as far as Australia. And that was friggin' awesome. I mean, my first band, called Paradox, you remember? Yeah. There was the first record we put out. I had this jeans on, and I had Link Wray painted on it. And 2 years later, I play with Link Wray. Can you imagine that? Mind blown, totally. But, well, as you can see, Rudy gave me a call years later if I wanted to play Link Wray's music again with the Gentlemen. What do you think I would say? Yeah, of course. Anytime. I mean, thanks to Rudy. If it wasn't for Rudy, I wouldn't be here. So, hey.
Good. Cool, thank you, Eric. Cool, man. What about you? How did you get into rock and roll music, and in particular, of course, talking about Link Wray, first time that you heard Rumble? La prima volta che ho sentito Rumble e come sei entrato nel rock and roll.
Traduci te, eh?
Sì, I will have to
Si vada più tranquillo.
Yeah.
Niente, in Italia diciamo che la mia generazione siamo partiti col punk rock alla fine degli anni 70.
In Italy, his generation started with punk rock at the end of the 70s. Oh, you're happy, Ali?
Nei primi anni 80 il punk cominciava già a essere qualcosa di stanco per chi aveva già cominciato negli anni 70.
They say that basically in the early 80s people started already being tired of punk, classic punk, especially for the ones who started in the middle of the 70s, needed already something.
Per cui in Italia dobbiamo ringraziare delle band come i Cramps, come i Fatstones, come Gun Club, che praticamente sono stati il ponte per riscoprire tutto quel tipo di sonorità che in Italia erano quasi sconosciute.
So basically we needed these bands like the Fatstones or the Cramps to bring back those kind of sounds that were a bit lost or probably not even fully arrived in Italy. So Dom is thanking all these bands because it's thanks to them that this kind of sound arrived basically in Italy.
Così dopo questa prima band che avevo, che si chiamavano Chrome e Motherfuckers, con cui ho suonato da from 79 to 84, abbiamo fatto una band nell'83 che si chiamava Not Moving.
The former band in 1983 called Not Moving.
In Italia la scena non era come all'estero, cioè completamente divisa, surf, rock and roll, garage, cioè era una scena unica.
There were not separate scenes for all this music in Italy, so everybody was just one scene for all this music, surf, garage, rock and roll, you know, everything.
Che in Italia erano già arrivati Stray Cats, Meteors, che quelli invece erano stati il ponte per riscoprire gli anni 50.
So the Meteors and the Stray Cats actually helped to rediscover the bridge to the 50s. So
Quindi tutta questa nuova onda ci ha aiutato in Italia a riscoprire appunto band come Sonics, tutta la scena di Nuggets, appunto Link Wray.
So this is where actually all these bands help to rediscover that kind of scene, that kind of music, and which brought us also to know the rediscover the Sonics and this sound, all the sound. So basically, the early '80s for Dome has been the. And Aldo, you said something. You said I have something to say about Link Wray. Say it.
For me, Link Wray is the link, because his name is the link. So the link is exactly, his name is perfect, because Duane Eddy and Link Wray has been the link for another music that has been called surf music, but he was not doing really surf music. Like we said, the Beach Boys, where the vocals and the surf instrumental comes from the instrumental music that we had in the 50s, so even the Ventures has been considered some surf. Basically the Fire Force and other band and Duane Eddy, but especially Link Wray was the real link to make rock and roll, punk and surf music all together to make other kind of music. For me, Link Wray is really one of the best players in the world. I have 65 albums by Link Wray in all English, American and other countries albums, because I like him very much, and I think he was the first EP real in Indian, an Indian person. Was very strange because he was from Indian origin, right? American, yeah, not Indian from India, not from India. No, because in Italy is a word very strange. We cannot say Indiano, that means Indians. We call now American Indians. Then they said no, this word doesn't work. So we are probably changing again the name of that word. So it is very strange. So in any case, you know, when I heard the rumble is the same that has been done by what's happening in the radio station in the States. When they first heard the rumble in the 1958, that song couldn't go in the radio because people were doing violence. So they said, they cut out. The song could not be on the radio. So you think about it. An instrumental song that is doing violence, that's very strange. Also because we were in this 58, but that's the truth. So Link Wray is #1.
Thank you, Aldo. Thank you, Aldo. All right. Yeah, Rudy, you started Link Rudy in the J-Man. When you started, it was your idea to have to do a cover band of Link Wray music, and how was the scene in those 80s around you for this kind of music?
Well, we started in 1986, and we never intended to be a band. The Fuzztones had just broken up, and I told the story on stage yesterday, but if you didn't hear it, two of the guys left from the Fuzztones and left me and the bass player and the drummer, and we were looking for a guitar player. And we auditioned everyone in New York City, and it took a year, and we still never could find anyone who could play our stuff. And it got to be very tedious, holding auditions several times a week and having Grateful Dead guys come up and just heavy metal idiots, and you know, we just got really fed up, but we didn't want to break up the band. So what we would do, and we'd have people come up, you know, say they were going to come and they didn't show up. So here we are, just stuck at a rehearsal space that we're paying for. So we thought, what can we do with just 3 guys? So we started playing Link Wray stuff just for our own amusement, because it sounded good as a 3-piece band. We never intended to play out. And it turned out that after a month or 2, we had like 15 Link Wray songs. It was just accidental. It was just because we were having fun. And we were rehearsing in this big, big building on Times Square that all the musicians rehearsed at, especially all the garage bands at the time in New York City, the Fleshtones, the Vipers, the Cheapskates, the Trifles, the Out of Place, the Mad Violets. And they would all come to our rehearsal room to check us out. And no one ever heard this kind of stuff. I mean, actually, almost no one on the garage scene even knew who Link Wray was. They just heard us doing this instrumental stuff and they liked it. And everybody kept saying, man, you gotta go out and play, you gotta go out and play. But there was nowhere to play. No one wanted instrumental bands in New York City in 1986. There was no place where we could get a gig. And then finally, two of the bands, the Vipers and the Maneaters, were playing a brand new club and they asked us to open for them. So they didn't even tell the club we were an instrumental band. So we came on first, and we literally tore the house down. People went nuts. The audience back in New York in '86 was very, very jaded, and they wouldn't dance. They stood there and looked at you like. We played and people started to dance on tables. It was crazy. It was really insane. And just because of this one show, some promoter in Canada heard about it. And he called me up and he said, would you guys like to tour Canada? One show, we didn't have a record, nothing at all. So we went and we did a 2-week tour of Canada, and then we came back and we recorded all of our stuff in the rehearsal room at a party. We invited all our friends to just sit around and we recorded it all, and then we broke up. So that's what we did. That was the original J-Man. You can see some videos on YouTube of the first gig. It was phenomenal. And then me and the drummer moved to Los Angeles and reformed the Fuzztones, ironically with 3 guys who had moved there from New York. That's why we couldn't find anyone in New York. The good players moved to Los Angeles. And so the Fuzztones began again. And I put the J-Men aside for a couple of years. And I thought that was just a little thing we did on the side. Meanwhile, our record actually came out, and it got on the charts. And then people started asking for the J-Men to tour Europe. You got to remember, we never intended to do one show. Here we are 31 years later. Six albums. It's mind-blowing to me because when I try to do something, it's always really, really hard. And when I don't put any effort into it at all, it works. So the J-Men always worked, so we're still playing. So thank you.
Yeah, this today had to be just a little talk and before about Link Wray and basically mainly the pre-surf era. Now before having questions, or I would like to know if someone of you want to say something, especially what I think about Link Wray in his position in time before surf. I talk about surf, of course, because this is the Surfer Joe Summer Festival. But before getting to there, there's one question that I want to ask to the musicians here on stage. Because Link Wray, apart from the history and everything, he did something else for rock music. He introduced to the ears of everybody the use of the power chords, the distortion, you know, the saturated sound. Other than, of course, that was not the only one. You mentioned Chuck Berry, but other guitarists, including Don Eddie and so on, bring the guitar in front. A little bit what Dick Dale said for Buddy Rich, for example, when he brought the drums in front, and Dick Dale wanted to sound like Buddy Rich. So same thing. These guitar players, instead of having the guitar as a back instrument to just play chords and follow a musician, they brought it in front. You know, pre-instruments, that the guitar is the voice of the band. So, how do you see, Eric and Dome, about this technical, the technique use of Link Wray, the way of playing and how the use of the power chords influenced the entire, basically any rock guitarist in the planet since then?
Tutta quella scena appunto di cui parlavamo prima degli inizi degli anni '80 è stata influenzata moltissimo. Io personalmente prima di conoscere Link Wray suonavo con una Les Paul e un Marshall.
So he says that the early, I interrupted after a second, otherwise I don't remember what you say. I'm not a professional translator. So due to the scene, there was before being influenced at all by this kind of music, he was playing. Cosa usavi?
Una Les Paul,
I was using a Les Paul
un
and a
Marshall.
Marshall amplifier.
Invece dopo aver sentito Rumble di Link Wray, che poi suonavamo anche con i Not Moving dal vivo, oltre a Wipeout, Pipeline, altre canzoni strumentali che erano una novità per noi.
So he basically changed, and after listening, after hearing the first time Rumble, and he influenced the whole thing, because even with his band Not Moving, he was playing other songs that are more into the surf scene, like Pipeline or Wipeout. But listening to the sound of Link Wray changed his vision of the sound.
Eh sì, ha cambiato per sempre il mio modo di suonare, perché poi dopo ho comprato una Stratocaster e un Fender Super Reverbero e tuttora uso in maniera smodata il vibrato.
Oh, he went after that he decided to go into Fender instruments and vibrato and all those things. So he changed his sound. Although I think I'm not very much sure that the Fender sound really applies too much to Link Wray. You have to, well, some amplifiers maybe the early tweets that were not so powerful, but mainly for what I understand, Link Wray was used to, when he recorded Rumble, he broke the speaker just to try to replicate the aggressive sound of the live act.
Yeah, what Link told me was he was looking for sound, and he wasn't interested in copying anything. He wasn't interested in what brand guitar he was playing. He was just not bothered with all the, image things and all the expensive guitars. He would use any guitar and try and get new sounds from it. I talked to him about how he got this rumble sound, and he said, well, when we played live, we did some vocal stuff with his brother singing, and we did some instrumentals. And he said every time I played an instrumental song, my brother would put his singing microphone in front of my amplifier, so the guitar would go boom, go crazy, and kids loved it. And he said when I wanted to recreate it in the studio, I couldn't get that sound on tape because it would distort on the recorder, and I wanted to have that distorted sound but controllable, and I tried all sorts of things. And then I punched a hole in the tweeter of my amplifier. Everybody says he punched a hole in his amplifier in the speaker, but it was in the upper tweeter. And he said then I got this raw sound, and he didn't stop there. I mean, he was always looking for sounds, and he was always trying to push the envelope to do things in a different way than anyone else. Because he told me he actually wanted to play jazz. So the connection you made with jazz music, that's there all right. But he said, I could never play like Chet Atkins. So I had to find a way to express myself in other ways. And so he, instead of making it more complicated, he took the essence of what he had in his mind and brought it back to just the basic things, looking for sounds, looking for less is more, saying things with one chord instead of trying to, wheedle about. And that was the essence of Link Wray. And by the way, you say Rumble was banned for the gang violence relation, but it was in some radio stations banned because of the sexual content. An instrumental song being banned for being too sexual. Hey, I think that would relate to you, really. Yeah. We now secretly know why you play this music.
It works.
I know.
By the way, it can be very good background music.
Well,
Yoga?
For yoga, yeah. So,
now the last thing I want to ask is just an opinion.
Make it Frisco yoga.
Just an opinion based on what I was mentioning before, what is my personal thought, I said another occasion also. Do you think that the music of Link Wray, in your opinion, actually inspires surf music, or is somehow related to the birth of surf music in California? And yes, why do you think it's so? What do you think about this?
Me?
Yeah, anybody.
You go first.
Well, I do know that a lot of surf bands covered Rumble and Jack the Ripper, and in fact, somehow, I don't know how, but Link even made it all the way over to England. I believe on the second Dave Clark 5 album they do Rumble. Anyone who's really familiar with the Dave Clark 5 will notice that the J-Men play a few Dave Clark 5 instrumentals as well. They were definitely in tune, not with surf music, but with the grungier, dirtier stuff, you know, and you have the impression when you look at the Dave Clark 5, very clean-cut guys. But if you listen to the second album or whatever Rumble is on, they also do a song we do called No Stopping. It's total hot rod music. It's the kind of music that you would expect to like get in a car and you know, race somebody off of a cliff, like Rebel Without a Cause, you know. I think there's a correlation only really with the music, not with what Link represented. To me, surf music's very clean and very wholesome. Beach Boys are really wholesome. Jan and Dean's very wholesome. I don't play surf music much myself. I think the J-Men did one surf song we wrote specifically because people kept telling me we were a surf band, just because we were instrumental. But we're not. We're a rock and roll band, you know. But we do one song that I wrote called Cyclone, which is specifically intended to be surf. I don't know if I'm answering the question at all. I'm rambling. I know I'm rambling, but I think I'm going to get to something interesting if you give me a second. No, maybe not.
Well, not that answers the question, but actually what you say is correct. We all know.
I'm sorry. But you know what the thing is, that Link Wray was a guitar hero, and so was Chuck Berry. So now you'd say Chuck Berry, surf music, not much correlation. Well, yes, actually a whole lot. He influenced surf music much more than Link Wray, in my opinion. And the reason why is the Beach Boys. Beach Boys stole Sweet Little 16 and changed the lyrics, and I forget what song that was. Surfing USA, okay? And then ironically, if you look at the Chuck Berry live album, Chuck Berry on Stage, it credits him for doing Surfin' USA. It's not on the album, but it says it is. That's weird. And then if you listen to Fun, 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 that's Chuck Berry's introduction, if I ever heard it. And most people can't even play Chuck Berry correctly, including Keith Richards, who tries his hardest, but he only gets it about half right. If you listen to Fun, 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 whoever played that, and it was not Carl Wilson, got it down. That was probably Glenn Campbell from the Wrecking Crew, and he got it down. He got it down, boy. And it's not easy to play. Any of you guitar players who ever really sat down and tried to play Chuck Berry, not just listen to Keith Richards and goes, oh, anybody can play that. You try to play Chuck Berry. Chuck Berry was also a jazz player, so there you go with the jazz influence too. If you listen to Chuck Berry do a song called Liverpool Drive, it's pure hopped up, rocked up jazz, and it's really difficult jazz. You know, it's shit that none of us in this room could ever dream of playing. Trust me, I know, because I'm working on it now. And I've been playing for 44 years, okay, so that's the man. But Link Wray is a huge influence on everybody, whether they know it or not. You know, just like Chuck Berry and Bo Diddley. Even if you don't know, you're influenced by the guy who was influenced by the guy who was influenced by Link Wray. So in any context, you're still influenced by Link Wray, even if you never heard of him. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, I think we agree with that, and even
nice.
we agree with saying that surf is mostly instrumental, let's say so, but not everything that is instrumental is surf. So of course this is completely correct. Even in modern surf music, there's a lot of bands that credit themselves to be a surf band, but surf probably is more strict to certain rules. Although even in the 60s band, there were clean bands like the Lively Ones, for example, and very dirty bands like the Centurions. If you take the wedge of the Centurions, they were very dirty. Yes, Arnie, you can come, you can say whatever you want. With that shirt, you can say whatever you want.
Well, we're only talking about the instrumental thing about Link Wray. Okay, because, okay, just short, I'm the biggest Link Wray fan. I got a Link Wray tattoo. I come from a hardcore...
Here it is.
I come from a hardcore scene in the 80s. I just what I said, you're looking down and going through the, what you seeking for, what's influencing the people who are playing the music I like. And then I came up to it with Link Wray. But I also came up with Elvis, rockabilly, stuff like that. And Link Wray had a career that goes down like a wave. Yeah, surf music, wave.
Yeah.
But in the 80s, you know that, he was in New York playing with Robert Gowan, reinventing rockabilly. And he did that in a same style that influences bands like the Meteors, all psychobilly, stuff like that. So he's a big influence in that, and because I'm a big psychobilly and rockabilly fan. That's what drives me.
Well, there's more, because when he went to the 3-track Shack, he recorded some very country-ish stuff, and that is almost a template for Americana later on.
Calexico did a cover of it.
Yeah.
I got goosebumps now thinking of that song. That's I heard it live. Playing Calexico, playing a Link Wray song. There wasn't really an instrumental, but he wrote some beautiful songs.
Yeah.
So he was a great songwriter too. Don't forget that.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, we were focusing on the pre-surf era, but Link's done so much more than that, yeah, absolutely.
Special. Thank you, Arnie. Thank you, Arnie.
He made a band with John Cipollina. He made also psychedelic music. He made a band with John Cipollina while he was with the Quicksilver, and they never made an album, but there is a lot of stuff all together. And that means that John Cipollina, for me, is one of the best guitar players in the world, because I'm a big fan of Quicksilver. He has been influenced completely by Link Wray. That's why they play together.
Yeah.
Thank you.
In the,
Bruce, no, you have to come here because you're the real surfer in this room.
Yeah, I saw a couple of shows with Cipollina and Link Wray at Winterland in San Francisco during that period. Yeah. And I'm a huge Cipollina fan. And playing with Link Wray was Cipollina was a huge Link Wray fan.
Yeah.
And one of the greatest shows ever. And I'll never forget those 3 shows I saw with those 2 guys, Cip and Link Wray. It was something to behold.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. So, anyone else want to comment or say something about that? Oh yeah, Clary.
First of all, thank you for a fantastic gig last night. Thank you. Interesting, Day Clock 5, clean and dirty. My friend's father wrote the script for the movie Catch Us If You Can. Oh yeah. And he's always says, Day Clock 5. Many children fucking hated it. they did not want this clean stuff all the time. They hated it. They used it as anyone uses a video now to show off their cheesy grins. And it makes me think, how many bands back then are restricted by management to be clean and nice and smiley when they want to bloody rock?
Yeah.
You know, it makes me wonder.
That's why you want to listen to the B-sides of the 45.
Well, this is an interesting part, and again, because we're at a surf festival, this is an interesting thing to say, because this is basically how surf music was born in a way. Surf music was not exactly so clean as in the record. If you hear the stories of the Pavilion or the Rendezvous Ballroom, everything was very wild. You know, when they were doing the surf stomp, the building was coming down. The Bel Airs themselves, so you know the Bel Airs, you know Paul, you know, see what kind of guy is dead, you know Mr. Moto, and all the, they played 2 times at the Rendezvous Ballroom, and both times the managers say you will never come back here anymore, because they were surfers were fighting, so there was this violent tribal aspects that sometimes is not translated completely into the records. Yeah. So it was not translated completely the records. The records sometimes were clean, but what was at the back of the music, there was a movement, a cultural movement at the back.
It was underground, wasn't it? It was pretty much underground.
What?
Surf.
Oh yeah,
It was an
of
underground
course.
movement. It was like punk.
Yeah, it was there. I mean, if your daughter was dating a surfer in 1958, you were not a happy father. That's the
No way.
All right. I think we're done. Thank you very much. Thank you, Aldo, Rudy, for being here. Just check in today. Well, ask them a question if you want. They're here, so spend the time with you all. Check them at the merchandise stand, close to the Surfer's Joy, the blue tents, and Rudy, as the books were sale, merchandise and everything. So just see you there.
And CDs and T-shirts and
CDs,
albums.
Yes. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Warren.
Yeah, he's